and welcome to episode 51 of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nishay from NishaySnow.com. To find the links and bullet points from this episode, go over to NishaySnow.com/51. And you're going to want to do that today because we mention, not really me, my amazing guest mentions a lot of links that I think will help you kind of in your business and find that support that you're looking for. So my guest today is Elayne Fluker, and she is amazing. I first discovered her, I believe it was like a listing of podcasts you should listen to somewhere. But anyway, her podcast is Support is Sexy. And she has a Facebook group, which I've since joined. And basically, the premise of her whole business really is it's okay to ask for support and that we all need support. And she talks about that in this episode, along with some other goodness, which is like, if you're contemplating making a jump from 9 to 5 and becoming an entrepreneur, like things to consider. And in her case, she'll talk about it, so I don't want to give too much away. She started out with, a traditional 9 to 5, like interning at Essence and, also working at other places like Martha Stewart Living. And then at some point in her career, she was like, you know what? I want to go out on my own. I think that just goes to show that everybody has their own journey. And so some people decide to be an entrepreneur, sooner rather than later or not at all. Like sometimes people just continue to have like a side hustle and be an entrepreneur that way. But it all just depends on what makes sense for you. So that's why I love sharing these stories from amazing women so you can figure out like how you want to do it, like what's the best thing for you. And I think she gives some amazing tips on amazing advice on what you should consider. And then we also get into some other goodness like creating a following and marketing and all that good stuff. So just before we begin, please take a moment wherever you're listening to subscribe to the podcast just for a second. And then also please rate me 5 stars if you're on the iTunes app, on the Stitcher app. And if you're on YouTube, just give me a quick thumbs up. I really appreciate it and it helps the show. Okay, so let's get to Elayne. Hello, Elayne, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yes. Before I get into your amazing business, can you just tell the listeners just a little bit about your background?
Yes, my background. Well, let's see. I've worked in media for more than 20 years now, if you can believe it, even though I'm only 15. I don't know how that's possible,
Right.
but that's what's happening over here. But yes, I've been a media girl for a long time. I started off in magazines. My first internship was at Essence in publishing, and that's where I started my career as an editor, a very junior editor at Essence, actually as an assistant for Susan Taylor. And then I worked my way up there and then throughout the industry, moved from different magazines to digital media, then into doing video. And then I moved on to podcasting, which is now, of course, this is over the course of the years, but
Right.
moved into the podcasting space, but all along the lines of media. And that is what I'm truly passionate about. And even more precisely, I'm passionate about creating spaces for women to share their stories. So that has evolved now into what is the Support is Sexy podcast, which I host, which airs 5 days a week on your favorite podcasting platform. And also the Support is Sexy mastermind, which is where you and I know each other. And a lot of other things that are coming about, but really that align with this idea of creating spaces for women to share their stories and the Support is Sexy idea that empowering women to know that having it all doesn't mean doing it all alone.
Yes. And I'm curious because let me know if this is incorrect, but you now are a full-time entrepreneur, correct?
Correct. Yes. And have been since 2014. Yes, 2014, I believe it was. The last full-time position I had was with Martha Stewart Living. And I was managing director of the website for Martha Stewart and Martha Stewart Weddings.
I love Martha. I'm a crafter, so I love
Oh,
Martha.
oh, yes. That was all for you, Nashay. That was all for
Yes.
you.
I go at Michael's and I'm like, oh, Martha has a little tool to help me cut paper. Great.
Martha has everything. Okay? She has a tool for everything. Yes, that's where I was. And then I made the transition, if you will, into full time entrepreneurship. And they were the women who I worked with there, one in particular, Misha, who was the general manager, I believe, at the time. She might still be there, but she was just so great with me making that move and me continuing to work with them then as a client on a project that they had for several months. So that was good and just a lesson about the value of good relationships.
And then, because of course there's some listeners out there and they're in this kind of weird, maybe transition period. Like maybe they've worked for a corporation for 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And they're just like, I don't know. I got this 401k. I've got, you know, a steady paycheck coming in. But then I also have like this side business that's doing well. How did you determine that making the jump was right for you?
One of the things I would say from anyone who's in that situation, if you can stay and do both for a while, why not do both? You can
Right.
have your full time job and have your side hustle. And I say that as someone who did make the jump. And if I don't know if I would do it differently because of where I was. And I wasn't at all miserable there. I didn't hate my job. I was making incredible money, a 6-figure salary, living in New York, doing well, which made it harder to leave, actually. But if I thought about it again, if not there, but in other cases where I was offered, say, a full time job at some other companies, and I said no because I was so focused on being an entrepreneur, I might have considered it differently. And what I say is thinking about how can this be a both and situation as opposed to an either or situation.
Mm.
Sometimes I think we make it an either or, and this is in business or making a leap in your career, in life in general. Sometimes we make things an either or situation when there could be a possibility that this is a both and you can experience the best of both worlds. Not saying that that'll make it easier, but I mean, is it easy to make a choice between two great things? If you can make the choice to experience both as long as you can, if that's what you really want, then I think that's what I would offer to people about that. Now, for me, in
Mhm.
making the jump at the time, I was just at that point where I really wanted to give myself a try in business. I just wanted
Mm.
to see if I could do it. And I had a company, Chic Rebellion TV, which was an internet TV network for women of color. So it was all video content that I produced and that I used content from other content producers all around the world, creating images for women of color. I was very and still very passionate about that at that time. And I wanted to make the leap and truly try that. But what I ended up doing, to be honest, was making the leap and freelancing. So
Mm.
continuing to work with Martha Stewart, continuing to work with a lot of the companies that I already had relationships with, which was great and great money, actually even more money than I was making before, but I wasn't fully executing my business, which was my plan. But I didn't have all the coaching and all the great stuff and the podcasts and the things that I know about
Right.
now, right? Hindsight is
Right.
2020, Shay. Hindsight is 2020. But so that was the reason I did it. But again, if I were advising anyone now, if you have that great job and you love it, if you're miserable, then I mean the choice is probably obvious. But if you
Right.
love it, if you love it, and there is a way for you to have your business on the side, which I know a lot of women now do that I speak to and even interview on the podcast, or if they haven't left yet, maybe they're about to retire. If they're in their even in your 40s, you can retire if you've been in
Mhm.
the business for a while. They are looking at how to make that transition without it being sort of a rip the band-aid off kind of thing. It doesn't have to be difficult.
And when you first started your website, like how did that look? Or when you first started your business, like branding yourself, did you start with a podcast? Did you start with a class? Did you start on social media? Like how did you kind of slowly build in all the things that you now offer? Because like I know now you do speaking, you have like a mastermind, like you have several, and which we'll get into, like you really diversified your income. But I'm just curious, like did you focus on one at a time, and in the beginning, what did you focus on? Sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's great. And I was going to say, that's a great question. I started, at first, it was just getting a new version of ElayneFluker.com up. So at first, when I initially set up that domain, I'm a domain freak. I have about 30 something, I don't know. But when I first got my name and set up a page, it was just a one page with the bio for, I don't know how many years, many, many years. And then March of, I'm so bad with the years. I think this was 2015. I decided to get a website actually designed. I got pictures taken by a friend and really like a sister, but a very close friend, Tamara Fleming Photography in Jersey. She's fantastic, but she's just a wonderful photographer. Anyway, she did some photos
your photos
for me.
are amazing.
Oh, thank you. It's not me. It's all her.
We will link to her in the show notes.
Thank you. Yes, she's wonderful. But I decided to really make it look professional, something that I would feel happy about. So I started there and I thought about the things that I wanted to convey. And at that time, it was just the homepage, obviously, with a bit about what I was all about. And then about me, a bio, and I had the work with me page. So I thought about services that I could provide with people. So it was content strategy, content development, I think, and then consulting. So just a few things that I thought could be services that I offer overall. And I didn't have the podcast then. I wasn't even listening to podcasts when I did that. And I believe those were the only things that I had at that time. So it started in stages, which a lot of things in business, I'm sure you agree, or maybe you agree, I don't want to project on you, but a lot of people have probably experienced, if you've been in it a while, it starts as one thing and then it evolves and then you start adding things. As you mentioned, the speaking section, I just added that last week or maybe in the past couple of weeks. It literally, I might have updated it today, girl. Like it's very new. But you start seeing, okay, fresh. Like this is what, and again, a new picture from Tamara from this summer. So I added that picture there. But so, you start, what I did, I started with just getting the bases up and then keep adding from there. And as far as in my business, how I started, again, starting with those services and I was already actually working with different people. So Huffington Post, I think that came a little bit later. And as I mentioned, Martha Stewart. So I looked at what was I already doing that I could package as a service. And this is something that I always share with people that I either mentor or work with as a consultant. How can you package what you're already doing? If that's something you want to continue to do, keeping that in mind. But how can you package it and then be able to present it to someone as an offering or something you can sell? So that's how I presented it on my website for people to be able to sort of engage with the kinds of things that I could offer. But then in 2016 or maybe late 2015, I started listening to podcasts as just a hobby. I was in the office at Martha Stewart working on a different project, and it took a lot of editing and sitting at a desk and focusing all day. And I didn't want to listen to my Rihanna playlist all day, although I love Rihanna. I needed just something else. I said, what else can I listen to? So I asked a lot of friends what were they listening to, and a lot of them said podcasts. So they suggested some to me, which was Tropical NBA, Smart Passive Income, Entrepreneur on Fire. I wanted business podcasts. There's tons of other topics, but I was really in that space and needed, honestly, some motivation at that time. And that's how it started in Tim Ferriss show. And that's how it started for me. Yeah, listening to podcasts and then realizing a lot of the top business podcasts, or at least the ones I listened to, most of them were by men. Most of them were by white men. Most of them didn't often feature women, definitely not that often women of color. So then I started to think, well, maybe there's a space here where I could do a podcast. And then that evolved into Support is Sexy. And the Support is Sexy concept started with a workshop that I actually took in 2015 was a good year. 2015, I think I keep saying that. The workshop that I took called Momentum. It's a personal development workshop. And during that time, in a group of all these people who are captains of industry, leaders in their areas, this was in New York, people who are really doing it in whatever their area is, being experts in their areas. The two things that I found was most difficult for most of us to ask for were love and support. And I didn't realize until seeing it reflected in them, right? Until seeing it reflected in them, just how much I struggled to ask for love and for support and to accept it, to ask for it and to accept it. So during that
Mm-hmm.
time, this phrase came about of saying, support is sexy, support is sexy. And I started saying it to myself as a personal mantra and then to other people. And I could see, especially the women I shared it with, how they lit up when I said this idea of, well, girl, support is sexy. They would think, oh,
Right.
yeah, okay, yeah, I can do that. And that's how that evolved on its own. So later when podcasting came along, I thought, well, maybe this is an idea for a way to get this support is sexy idea out there more. And then that's how that
Mm-hmm.
evolved into that. And then later came the mastermind, support is sexy mastermind, as I started learning more about that and being in a mastermind myself. So then all of those things evolved and I just added them to the website or wherever I wanted to, have them as an online presence. And I think that's a lot of how business overall just evolves.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, for the listeners out there, I know the majority of them either have heard of masterminds, but I don't think all of them know exactly what a mastermind is or why it might be beneficial. So, could you just talk a little bit about that and why you decided to create one?
Yes, I joined a mastermind led by a woman named Rachel Tenenbaum. This is also in New York. And I started off by going to one of her events. She hosts events, I guess, maybe several times a year. But during that time, it's all these women, and actually it's women and men in the room. But she talked about her extraordinary life mastermind. And I didn't know anything about masterminds at that time. And I decided to sign up after talking to her and what the experience would be like. And it was such an amazing experience to be in a room of other women entrepreneurs. Actually, some were in Toronto, they were in different places, but we came together in one room in the beginning. And just to get that feedback, that experience, hear about other people's experiences, not experience as much as expertise, but just their experience as other women entrepreneurs, and to be around other women that I didn't know. I love the women that I do know, but sometimes you have to get around some
Yeah.
different people, right? And hear
Yeah.
some different opinions and experiences. So it was just such a great experience for me. But then after that, I started learning more about people having masterminds online. And I started the Support is Sexy Mastermind Facebook group just to have a space for women to come in and share their stories, but really focusing on support. So support is a core value and pillar, if you will, of my business, support and collaboration. So in that group, there's groups, Facebook groups about all kinds of topics and different things. And I belong to many of them. You probably do too. But I really
Mm-hmm.
wanted my group to be about support. So I come in every once in a while and say some version of, hey, what are you up to? What could you use support with? Or what are you celebrating? Or what, really focusing on support. So that's how the Facebook group started. But then as I began to learn even more about ways that you can turn your mastermind into an offering for people, going back to what we said earlier, packaging things and making it an offering, I created
Mm-hmm.
supportisexymastermind.com, which is now a group that you can also have access to the Facebook group, but you also get monthly workshops with women entrepreneurs from all around the world where we talk about their specific area of expertise. And you also get access to a membership site, which is just information, tools, resources, things that you can get access to whenever you need them. So there's a private membership area that's a part of that group. And then I'm also actually next month starting monthly mentoring calls with me, and I'll bring on special guests as well. That'll be just for mastermind members.
Oh,
And a
very
mastermind.
cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and it's for a small fee, $29 a month, or you can pay annually $299 for the year, which is a discount of however much that discount is. But
Right.
yeah, so it's a small, just to, because people I feel like need to, for most of us, you invest something that makes you show up more often. Like if you belong to the gym for free, sometimes we even pay for the gym and don't go. But imagine if the
Right.
gym was free, right? You never, ever, ever, ever.
No, like right. Because if people
No.
don't pay for something, then they're just like, ah, whatever. I'm not gonna.
Exactly.
You can give them a free book that will tell them, how to make $1,000,000. But if they didn't
Yeah.
pay that $20 for the book, it's a
Exactly.
weird thing, right? Like,
All
but yeah, they won't
psychology.
use it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So there's that. So that's why I didn't make it. Oh, this is $999. There are masterminds that cost tons of money a month, and I'm sure they're worth it. But this was just something you invest this, you be a part of this group. You have women around the world who can support you. And a mastermind, and your original question, is defined by Napoleon Hill. People first started hearing it then. Napoleon Hill wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, which a lot of
Oh yeah.
entrepreneurs talk about. And he described it, I'll read the quote, as the coordination of knowledge and effort of two or more people who work toward a definite purpose in the spirit of harmony.
Mm.
So, end quote. So that is what a mastermind is, getting around some people who support you, all about support, and who help you in your vision. And I will say with Rachel's mastermind that I was in, the Extraordinary Life Mastermind, I actually went in talking about Chic Rebellion TV, what I mentioned earlier. I was
Yeah.
focused on that. I need help. How am I going to make this grow? I really want to do this. And then I happened to mention in that room the idea, not even as a business, I just said the phrase, support is sexy. And they were all like, oh, I like that. Yeah. You know, you see people moving there. Yes, that's wonderful. And I was like, wait a minute.
Let
Maybe this
me.
is, yes,
Right.
what is this? Am I ignoring this thing that is here and saying, hey, this could be something, not even just this could make money. This could not, nothing like that. Just this could have an impact and change women's lives. And the next time we got together, one of the women said she's an entrepreneur, and I think she had just sold her business or was in the middle of it, and she was saying she was about to have a baby and a lot was going on, and she said to herself, support is sexy, and it made her call her sister and ask her sister to help her, which is something she
Mm.
said she never would have done before. And that's when I really, Nashay, was like, okay,
I
let me
need
figure
to do
out
something. Yeah.
what this could be. And that group really helped me shape that. That support is sexy could be something. So that's where that started. And then the mastermind, which we just talked about, evolved from that, really creating a space for us all to get together and share and share information and resources. So that's why I've added so many other things to it. Again, your business can
Yeah.
evolve. Yeah.
What I like about the mastermind too, one thing we touched on it, I feel like it is true. Like when people actually pay for something, they tend to value it more. But, also I think that it's important that it's a cost because sometimes people don't realize the amount of time that goes into these things.
Yes.
So because like for me, I do like a lot of stuff that like this podcast, of course we don't charge for our podcast, but that takes, it takes time to interview people, edit the podcast, put it onto the host, create the show notes. And so I think like when it's something important, I mean this is important too, but with masterminds or other business ideas that people are putting out there, it's important for them to be okay with like charging what it's worth because they're putting kind of the time and effort into it to make it something great for other people. And it's okay because I think sometimes people are like hesitant to charge for things because then they're afraid that people won't pay for it or I don't know, like they'll lose a following. But I'm just like, but if people value what you do and you value what you do, then the right people will come.
Right. And I think too, we have to see it as an exchange. And not even just money exchange, and then you're giving something for me giving you money. It's also an energy exchange. So you give me money, and I can use that money to pay for this site that I have to keep up, or
Yes.
pay for these guests that I have come on, or pay for as you mentioned, even with podcasting. I don't know about your plan. My plan is $75 a month because I do
Right.
5 shows, 5 days a show, 5 days a week. Excuse me. So all those things have to be paid for. So we're already as content creators or entrepreneurs, et cetera, making an investment because we love what we do and we want to offer it. But for us to continue to do these things, we need, say it with me, support. So,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
that's what I say. Think of it that way. You're asking for an exchange of energy so you can continue to provide the value and things that you do. Now, as you mentioned with your podcast, my podcast is free too, because that's the thing that I'm offering overall to tell people my message, what I'm about, what I'm up to, those kinds. So you find things that are going to be your quote unquote free content or your offering to people. But then you
Yeah.
create other things that if they do like that, you bring something and say, I've had people actually say to me, please create something that I can pay for.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like,
It's
okay.
kind of like their give back because they appreciate
Yeah.
all the knowledge
Right.
that, yeah, you're sharing.
Yes. So, yes, think of it as that way. You want to continue to do this. And this is an investment.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And then I'm just curious too, because I think folks sometimes struggle with this, like, maybe they're working on a corporate job or what have you. They might dabble in social media, but not really because it's only, for family and, maybe exchanging photos of their children or whatever. And then they have this business idea and then they're like, well, how am I going to let the world know about it? So, in the beginning, how did you kind of build the Support is Sexy tribe? Like, get people to notice you, to subscribe to your newsletter, and to start following you?
The main secret ingredient is consistency. So, wherever you do that on social media, or in my case, with the podcast, with the group, being involved in the group or engaged, I should say, in the Support is Sexy group, that would be the thing that has kept it growing. Mainly consistency. So, showing up when you say you're going to be there, a podcast 5 days a week, going to commit to it. I've been doing that over a year now, almost a year and a half. There, I think I missed 3 days, usually because I was sick or something happened, but I try to make up for it or whatever it takes to be consistent and be there for people. So that's one thing. And then it starts to grow and people start to tell other people about it. And then they listen to it on their way to work. It starts to become a part of their routine. So showing up when you say you're going to show up, then also letting people know about it. So in the Support is Sexy Mastermind, for example, the Facebook group in particular, I invited people at first because I just started the group, invited some people, see if they wanted to be in it. But then I asked those people to invite other people.
Mm.
So that's the way for me, that really helped and say, oh, ask people to join if you like this group. And then people would do that. So in the beginning, that's really what I was doing, just to help tell more people about it, get more people engaged, and then making sure in the group, at least, that you welcome people when they join. So that was something that I saw in a couple of other groups, and it made me feel special because no
Right.
matter how big your group is, just like, hey, Elaine, thanks so much for joining, tell us about yourself or whatever your group is about. So for me, I do that, welcome each person and say, tell us about how we can support you. So I think that was a way too that helped it grow because it really felt like a friendly space. And people have said the fact that someone acknowledged them or reached out to them, even if they go on and just lurk for the rest of the time, they know that they've been welcomed into the group. And then, of course, yes, social media is a part of it. I don't love social media. Or I don't love it as a task, I should say, having to do it all
Yeah.
the time. But again, with Support is Sexy, on my own, I do whenever I want. But on Support is Sexy, I really made sure to be consistent. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, just doing it steadily over years. And I still don't have. I think I just passed 1,000 on. Did I? Yes, on Instagram. But still, that took time to build up. So you just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. People share. Make sure the same way we mentioned welcoming in the Facebook group, I would say be as engaged as possible on social media. So if someone comments or someone retweets or someone, replies or anything like that on any of those platforms, do your best. It doesn't have to be in the moment. I actually just took social media off my phone so I could stop being so in the moment. So it doesn't have to be right in the
Look
moment.
at you. Yeah.
Yes, I had to. But you can still make sure that you, again, are consistent. And when is going to be the time that you go through all those messages and respond? And also, I would say with social media, well, I'm not a social media expert by no stretch, but my opinion, you don't have to try to be everywhere. So where are
Yeah.
the places that your audience, either they're there or you think that's where they are? I would start with those platforms and really double down on that. So Instagram is a big one. Twitter is big for me because people like to comment quickly. And then Facebook, just because there's billions of people on Facebook, even though Facebook is making it harder and harder for people to see your
Yeah.
content. So
I
I think people are
know.
flocking elsewhere. Yes. So look, I have a Snapchat with my name just because I wanted to reserve my own name, but I don't do Snapchat. I have Pinterest, but I don't do that as much, even though I hear people have a lot of success with it. So it's really looking at too where you can focus your energy so that you're not spread too thin, especially if you're doing it yourself. And I
Hmm.
actually this week, just spoke to a woman I worked with before who did all of my social media management for a Chic Rebellion. And I just
Hmm.
talked to her about supporting me with Support is Sexy. So eventually,
Oh.
yeah, eventually you want to get to that point where you can get some support, get some help, so it can be even better. So hopefully that will help it grow too, because she'll be able to focus some energy into it and be even more consistent. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, just like a couple things there. I mean, one, I think you're building a community, especially with that Facebook group. Like, I feel like that is like your jam. So when it
No,
comes to
thank you.
like one thing, sometimes it's picking like for some people it might be Instagram and they might have like 60 gazillion billion followers, right?
Right.
Some people, it's like Facebook group, but it is just trying to kind of like pick your poison, if you will. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you really focus on something, then it really flourishes and you build that community. Because I think sometimes people get so caught up, like, I have to get a billion Snapchat followers, a billion Twitter followers. And I've talked to people with like, 60, 70,000 followers, and they're like, it doesn't translate necessarily to dollars. And
Right.
I've talked to other people, and they might have like 300 followers on Instagram, and they're making six figures a year in their business. So,
Right.
but it's, but it really, to me, and talking to all these folks, it really boils down to just the community that you build. Of course, you need to be in these different places and so forth, but it's really having that core community that'll support you and like those products that you put out.
Excellent. Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And I think too, to quickly share also, the social media platforms, like I said, I'm no expert in it, but what I do know is a lot of people who have built their businesses on social media are, not all of them, but many are suffering because, especially if you did it, for example, on a Facebook and you had all these followers who liked your page. I mean, there's brands, big companies, H&M or whoever, who talk
Yep.
about having all these followers, and then Facebook changes their algorithm. And now none of those people see your content anymore unless you pay thousands of dollars for them to see your content. Well, if you're a big
Yeah.
corporation, you are upset about it, but sure, you can throw some money at Facebook. If you're a solopreneur or you're just starting out and you're just building your brand, and your brand was only about being on these platforms, you're going to struggle. That's going to be very difficult for you. So with all that we're talking about, with putting your attention there and being consistent and all of that, I do want to say, please make sure that you build your own platform. So if
Mm.
you're posting your articles on LinkedIn and all these other platforms, that's fantastic. Also post that blog on your site. And as much as
Mhm.
possible, try to drive people back to your site or whatever your websites or offerings are. So that's something I didn't know early on, but I wasn't building because I'm not great at social media. I had no intention of building my brand there, or just there, I should say. Of course, you want to build there, but not just there, just in
Mhm.
case, even Instagram, I don't know if you've noticed, you don't see your picture. Well, I haven't been on about a month, but you don't see your pictures in order like they used to.
Right, and I hate that. Right, they're
That's
they're
because
picking it for you. Yeah, their
Yes. So it's
algorithm.
just
Yeah.
like, what exactly? And they're owned by Facebook. So they're probably going that same direction. You might have to start paying for people to see your stuff on Instagram, and then
Mhm.
Twitter has, I don't think they've gotten to that point yet. It's kind of, I think, still in a chronological order, but I know they have promoted tweets. So and it
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, they're businesses. Eventually they have to figure out, just as we said, what is this exchange going to be like? How are we going to continue to make
Yeah.
money and make this make sense? So, that said, I would love to send just that heads up to people, just to be mindful that as much as you want to build your audience there, just as you said, it doesn't necessarily amount to money just because someone has 60,000 followers. It doesn't even amount necessarily to influence, because they might be posting things and not have engagement with a lot, which a lot of marketing brands are starting to look at now. You have all
Right.
these followers, but are they liking you? Are they really engaged with
Are
you? If
they
you have a
commenting? Yeah.
Yes, if you have 1,000 followers, but you have a 50% engagement rate, that's better than someone with, you know, 50,000 and 0% or 1%,
Right.
at least the same,
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're not putting your focus in those areas is very clear, and you have a lot of clarity around that, and really focus on, even last point, because I know I'm going long,
Oh, you're
Huffington Post.
okay.
Huffington Post, really, I'm passionate about this. Huffington Post, really, I used to be a contributor for them a lot, which a lot of millions of people were, blogger or whatever they call it. They recently sent out an email, which I'm sure is public information, saying that they're changing their platform. They're no longer going to have open contributions. You have to pitch now to an editor, I believe, and they'll let you know, et cetera. So all of
Mm.
these people who were bloggers or who said, I'm a contributor to Huffington Post, they don't have access to that anymore. Now you have to pitch
Mm.
like everybody else. So if you had built your whole thing on an example like in Huffington Post, which is a great platform, well, now you don't have access to that anymore, or you have to go through another route. You can't just post it on there like you used to. So
Mm.
again, just be wary of only having your content in other places and not having it in your own space.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Like collect them emails, folks.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
collect
can we
people's
just talk
emails.
about, yes, I think I posted that too in our group, right? Mastermind group as a reminder. Are you building your email list? Even I have to get better at being more conscious of that, but build your email list and come up with, again, as we talked about earlier, offerings for people. They'll give you their
Hmm.
email is currency. They'll give
Right.
you their email, right, for this free guide on how to design your website. Or one of the things that I recently did of getting more women on podcasts as guests. So I created a free gift, girlonpodcastgift.com, which is a guide for how to be an unforgettable podcast guest. Simple
Mm.
tips, fun, easy, but in exchange for your email, you get this guide. So coming up with lead generators, as they call them, but ways to collect emails so that you can be in touch with these people when everyone, which eventually I think they will, everyone decides to change their algorithms.
Yeah. It's so, so important.
Yes.
And then just one last question before I get just to the kind of rapid fire wrap up questions is, just like looking at your site, like it looks like you've done a really good job of, getting media exposure and being on different things, interviewed and so forth. And so I'm just curious for people out there who are not quite sure how to get that type of exposure. What were some of the things you did in order to get featured in different places?
Now, some of the places that, remember, I've been in the game a long time,
Yeah,
Nichelle.
right. I know,
So,
right?
some of the places that I was featured early on, like a CNN and Today Show, VH1, and some of those things were in when I was in positions at other companies. So, what was I on CNN for? I think this is how long ago this was when Halle Berry and Denzel were nominated for the Oscars. I don't know if you even
Oh
remember
yeah,
that.
I
It's a long
remember
time.
that.
Were you
Yeah.
a baby when that happened?
No, no,
Oh,
no. I've been in the game. I turned 40 in March. So
oh, you did.
I've been in the
Oh,
game
nice.
for a while. Yeah.
Yes. So, so things like that. So I was in media and in positions like entertainment editor or executive editor or managing editor in these big companies. So doing a lot of media around that time. And then some of the press around for the podcast and for myself, those things I got from just reaching out to people, reaching out to people, one, interviewing them on my podcast. A lot of the exchange that you see with podcasters, I'm sure, as you know, it's like, you be on my show, I'll be on your show. People just
Hmm.
have this great relationship, I feel like, in the podcast community. But then also people reaching out and because of, as we mentioned earlier, that consistency. So I
Hmm.
think Support is Sexy. I won't say the only because I don't know all the shows that are out there, but it definitely is one of the few podcasts focused on women entrepreneurs, hosted by a woman entrepreneur, by a woman of color, Black woman, that is 5 days a week. So I created this space that I felt like was a niche for me that I was passionate about. And then, as I always say, I doubled down on it. So really creating something that I felt like was different or that I didn't see a lot of. Again, not saying I'm the only one, but I didn't see a lot of, and then being consistent. So people like Demetria Irwin of thegrio.com wrote an article and included Support is Sexy as one of the top 5 podcasts you need in your life right now. I love that title. But that was something that I had no idea. I actually found out about that on Twitter. Went
Right. You're
on.
like, oh.
Yes. I was like, oh, this is
Right.
lovely. Thank you. This is wonderful. So then
Appreciate
those,
it.
yes. So those things start to come along that you don't know about or that you don't solicit, as they say, just earned media, right? So that's
Yeah.
what those kind of things are. And people started putting me on lists of different things. What's the other site that I really love? Mybrownbox.com. Brittany
I've
Marshall
never heard of
included
that.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, 56 podcasts that brown girl bosses are now playing. So
Mm.
you can see that on my website on the press page, but I included all of those there. So in the beginning, it is getting in touch with people, supporting them, showing your support for them, and then people beginning to reach out and say, I love what you're doing. Let me support you. So for anyone listening who is thinking about how to get press for your podcast, your business, or anything that you're doing, I will say I might be a little bit biased, but one of the best ways is being on podcasts right now because people are
Yeah,
listening
I
to,
agree.
yes, more and more. I mean, podcast listeners have grown, I think since 2015, it was 47 million or so. And now in in 2017 it grew to 67 or so million. So the listenership is growing more and more every day. People are listening to it on the go. Newer cars are going to be made with Wi-Fi in them so people can listen to podcasts in their cars. So it's only going to become more and more popular. And because there are so few either podcasts hosted by women or featuring women, that is not, for me, it's not necessarily a lack or a gap. It's more of an opportunity for you to get out there, share your voice, share your message. And that is one last thing I'll share. One of the reasons that I launched girlonpodcast.com in order to help women get on podcasts and to help women who host get great guests. So that was the whole impetus behind that. So that is a great way if you're just starting out, because so many people are looking for great guests. It doesn't mean you have to have been on shows before or have any other kind of press. If you have a website, it could be a simple website, as long as it tells who you are, what you're up to, what you're about, clear messaging and that kind of thing. It's great if you do have social media so people can at least see in one, these are the things I look for. At least see in one space or another what your message is like, what your thoughts are like, just so we can see a little bit of it, and then be able to articulate your vision, your message, and your expertise with confidence and ease. I always say. So those are the main things, and podcast is a great space for that, for you to be able to do that. So that's one of the things I would start with. And then the other things will absolutely come, because you, of course, will promote that podcast that you're on. And then other people will see, oh, okay, great. She does podcasts, and you'll get more of that. Yeah. So if you're not going to sign with an agency like a Girl on Podcast or any other, there's a lot of others out there, but we focus primarily on women. But if you're not going to do something like that, or a publicist or anything like that, you can start with looking at what are the shows that you listen to? What are the programs that you already watch that you might have access to? Are there ways for you to get on public television? By public television, I mean like PBS or those kind of things, your local television, I should say. Those are things we don't think about. We don't think about the local station, the local radio, even local events that we can go to in our community at the Chamber of Commerce. Can you teach a class? You never know who's going to be in that class. So there are things that you can look at. Exposure comes in a lot of different ways, not just, the Today Show and CNN and all those things, although that's great. I love having been on. So I always tell people, once you do it, you've done it. I never have to be on the Today Show again. I've done it once. I can say, right? So once you do it, you've done it, you have that under your belt. But don't forget about all the other opportunities that are right around you where you might be able to get in front of people, and you never know what that'll lead to.
Great advice. Awesome advice.
Thank you.
So just a few wrap-up questions. The first one is, have you discovered your passion? And it doesn't have to be related to what you do or what we just talked about. But if so, what is it? And if not, what are you doing to discover it?
I do think I've discovered my passion, and I will say it's from all the things that we've talked about in this work, and whether creating the podcast and the group and all of the other things. My passion is creating spaces for women to share their stories, and that whatever that looks like, in a lot of different ways, and finding different ways in order to do that.
What can you not live without? It could be anything: food, tech, makeup, furniture. I mean, anything in the world.
Hot tea. I love a cup of tea. Yes. I love
favorite brand?
Favorite. You know what, right now? Oh, I don't have the cup near me. I am drinking, is it Numi? I think it's Numi. They're rooibos tea. It's a red tea. I think it's from South Africa. Yes, it's so good. And I don't know, the tea costs like $7 or something for the box, but it's excellent. I usually drink a chai tea also, but I really love red tea. And for me, it's good because I read up about it. I love the flavor. It has like a vanilla flavor, but it also has anti-inflammatory ingredients in it. So that's something that's good for me. Yes.
Nice and healthy.
Yes.
And then also, where can the listeners find you? Please let them know any websites that you want to share, because you mentioned like a couple besides like your main
like
website, which is
7.
But they're great because, I signed up for like the last one where, if you want to be a guest, because sometimes I feel like services like that help, especially like me. I'm like a side hustle person, right? So I don't necessarily have like that time during the day to like send out emails and say, "Hey, can I be on your podcast?" So
Right.
anything I can do to like help
Yes.
save me time is amazing. So I think you have like several amazing things you offer, and then you have like the special sites to go with them. So yes, please give us all the websites
Oh,
and
great.
any
Thank you so
social
much.
media
And I would,
handles.
yes, and I would love to help you get on podcasts. I think you'd be great. And I think one last thing, I think people who are podcast hosts should be on other podcasts. Sometimes we just think about getting guests for our own shows, which is fantastic. But a great way to grow your audience, to grow your list, as we talked about earlier, and all of those things, is for you to be on other shows. And some of the bigger guests or bigger shows hosts, I should say that that's one of the biggest ways that best ways they've grown their audience. So something to think about too if you have your own podcast. Don't forget about you getting out there on other shows as well.
Great
Um,
advice. And I'm going
yeah,
to take your advice. I've been on one podcast, like, and that was
yeah,
like a year ago, maybe longer
mm-hmm.
than that. And I was like, I got to get on it. Yeah. And so when
Yes,
I saw
absolutely.
your announcement, I was like, I'm signing up right now.
Oh, good, 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 good. Excellent. So, yeah, so the ways you can get in touch, you can go to elaynefluker.com. So that's ELAYNEFLUKER.com. For Support is Sexy for the podcast, you can go to supportissexy.com. And you can, for the mastermind, I would love for you to join Support is Sexy mastermind.com will take you directly there. And then for Girl on Podcast, which is a podcast booking agency for women that connects women who podcast with women who guest. And you can go to girlonpodcast.com to find out more about that. Girlonpodcast.com. And for the free gift that I mentioned also about being an unforgettable podcast guest, last URL, girlonpodcastgift.com. Girlonpodcastgift.com. I think that's all of
Perfect.
them. Yes.
Yeah, and I'll have folks that are listening out there, like all of them listed in the show notes. So you can go over there, and I highly recommend you click, click, click away. Yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, Elaine, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking some time out and coming on to the show.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. It made me think too. Thank you so much.
What did I tell you guys? Gold, right? So it was amazing having her on the show. Thanks, Elaine, again for sharing your story and also giving us a lot of just practical tips from contemplating, making that leap to how to gain a following. So I feel you guys, if you are ready to make some decisions or do certain things in your business, that she gave us a lot of things we can actually act on. So thank you again, Elaine, for that. Elaine also gave us lots of resources. So if you head on over to nashesnow.com/51, and that's NACHESNOW, I have all of the links over there from her membership, mastermind membership, to her Facebook page, to the photographer she mentioned, the podcast, the books, everything she mentioned, I have linked up for you. So head on over there, click, and get educated, right? Like, it's literally, folks. I mean, it sounds so cheesy, but it's nothing to it but to do it. And I think her story showcases that when you put your mind to doing something, you can really achieve success. It's just like a little bit of hard work and vision, and you can get there. But okay, I have another amazing episode coming up next week. So please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, whatever your platform of choice is, iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Also, please rate me. It really helps people find the show. So if you take a second right now to rate me 5 stars on iTunes or Stitcher, I'd love it. And if you're on YouTube, please just give me that thumbs up, and also just leave a comment. I love to see you guys' comments and start like a little chat. That just as an extrovert, you know, I just love that engagement. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a excellent morning, noon, or night, and I look forward to chatting with you all next week. Talk to you later.